Hello, everyone.
Hello.
My name's Anyu, for those of you who don't know me. I am one of the teachers here. I haven't taught here for quite a while, but I'm a regular. What I want to offer over the next 6 weeks are some Buddhist teachings on compassion. I don't think it's any big secret that we're kind of lacking in that in general in this world right now. And I've been practicing with it a lot myself personally and also in my work at the hospital. I'm a hospital chaplain at Peace Health, working mostly at University District. So what we're going to do, just to give you a really brief overview, and since this is a drop-in class, I'll kind of review a little bit every week. But what tonight we're going to do is we're going to start with an introduction to what's called Lojong. And that's mostly a Tibetan practice. It's a very structured practice. I find it can be really helpful in cultivating compassion, and we'll say more about that as we go on. And then we'll do that for about 3 weeks or so, and then we'll spend about 2 weeks on metta, which is another compassion practice that comes out of the Theravada tradition in Southeast Asia. And then, depending on how things go, we may spend more or less time on metta, but the last class, anyway, I'm kind of hoping to look at some modern compassion practices. There's a lot of people, a lot of really smart people, neuroscientists and so on, who are doing a lot of research on compassion. So there's Kristen Neff, the self-compassion practice. You may have heard of her. Tibetan Jinpa, who's the translator for the Dalai Lama. He has a compassion institute. I think it's based at Stanford. And then there's also another, I forget his name right off the top of my head, but a Tibetan teacher who's based out of Emory University in Atlanta, who does some compassion training. So there's a lot of people doing this stuff right now. And it has now it has more scientific proof. And I think, these, obviously the Buddhists were onto something. So, so I kind of want to start out by giving some context for why we should practice this. And maybe it's obvious, maybe it isn't. I find having this kind of grounding is helpful. I think we're all aware that a human life is really challenging and possibly very daunting at times, and I think the last year has certainly socked it to us in ways that we did not expect would happen. And I think we also know, even though we're not always perfect at it, that life is complex, but it usually works better. It's not perfect, but it works better if we get along, if we're cooperative, if we're kind, if we're loving. Doesn't mean we have to like everybody, but and so on. But usually life works better when we do our best to get along. Maybe more importantly, in Buddhism, compassion combined with wisdom are like the two wings of a bird. So just as a bird cannot fly with just one wing, so as Buddhists, we cannot have compassion without wisdom, nor deep wisdom without compassion. And we can say that wisdom is deep penetration into the nature of reality, the wisdom that we develop through practice, and compassion is a heartfelt understanding of the suffering that all beings experience. All beings experience. None of us gets out of it. None of us is able to live a life without some measure of suffering. So from a Buddhist perspective, we can cultivate compassion through the wisdom teachings, such as the teachings of emptiness. Maybe I'm throwing some terms out that some of you aren't familiar with, but just kind of mostly in Zen, we approach compassion through sort of a wisdom lens, if you will. And we can talk about that more as time goes on. The Lojong practice and the metta is we arrive at wisdom through the practice of compassion. Then this is pretty general, but I think we actually, when we learn to be compassionate towards all beings, we start to see into the nature of reality, and we develop wisdom that way. So, in particular for me, I have found the Lojong teachings helpful in working with difficult emotions. Like most of us, I have at least one, maybe more difficult people in my life, and just in general, practicing with the state of things in the world and so on, I have found the Lojong can be really helpful. So, And I think it's really important to point out that our default untrained mind is typically not terribly inspiring. And so Lojong is designed to train us. Another teacher I read, rather than calling, well, actually, let me back up a little bit. Lojong means mind training. That's probably what I should have said first. So Lojong means mind training, or one teacher mentioned it as mind refinement. I like that word better, mind refinement. So our default untrained mind is not terribly inspiring. You know, we tend to get dragged around by our karma. Most of us are here because we know this at some level. And so Lojong can help us to sort of hone in and refine and use our mind and not just let it be what it is, not just let it run around. So compassion, again, is to understand that suffering is not just personal. It is personal, but it's not just personal. And so I want to just read a quote from, this is a really good book if you have a chance to pick it up. It's Norman Fisher's sort of Zen perspective on training and compassion. He's taken the Lojong practices, and I'll take a lot from this book because the language that he uses is a bit more accessible than some of the traditional Tibetan language. Oh, BTW, I will give you at some point in the class a handout from, it's also online. If you're online, did the PDF get uploaded? Did I send earlier? That's okay. I mean, it's not critical for tonight. I just wanted you to have this. This is the classic 7-point mind training, the Lojong practice that was developed by, I can't say the name, Chekewa Geshe Dorje, who wrote this in the 12th century. So, let me just make sure I've covered everything that I wanted to so far. So Lojong means mind training or mind refinement, and that's what we're going to focus on for the next 3 weeks. And then metta, loving kindness or goodwill, we'll do that the last, for 2 weeks or so. And then we'll look at modern practices. But a really important aspect of Lojong is that compassion can be taught. It can be learned, which is, I think, something we don't always realize, especially maybe in our modern culture. And so I really like what Norman Fisher wrote here. And he says, compassion and resilience are not, as we might imagine, rarefied human qualities available only to the saintly, nor are they adventitious experiences that arise in us only in extraordinary circumstances. And we do see that. But in fact, these essential and universally prized human qualities can be solidly cultivated by anyone willing to take the time to do it. They can become the way we are and the way we live on a daily basis. We can train our minds. We are not stuck with our fearful, habitual, self-centered ways of seeing and feeling. And to be sure, those habitual, self-centered ways can feel really powerful and really overwhelming, like we really are stuck that way. But we can learn, it takes some time, but we can learn not to be that way. So, another way of looking at this is what we're talking about with the Lojong practices is developing what's called bodhicitta. Has anybody not heard that phrase before? Bodhicitta? It's okay if it's not familiar. So, bodhicitta is it is a cultivation of the mind that strives toward awakening, an awakening for the benefit of all beings. So, citta is the Sanskrit word, I think, for mind, and bodhi is awakened. So awakened mind, but so developing bodhicitta is what we're aiming for in this Lojong practice and what we're aiming for in all of Buddhist practice, but this is one way to do it. I really want to emphasize that. This is one path in. It's not the only path and it's not the best path. It's one path. So, but bodhicitta is a quality that is prized, if you will, in all Buddhist practices. The mind that strives toward awakening, empathy, compassion for the benefit of all human beings. And I think Kenjo's teaching a class on the paramitas on Tuesday nights, right? So, hey, if you're going to that, you're going to get this from a different perspective because the 6 paramitas are another expression, if you will, of what we're going to be learning in Lojong. They're not as detailed. So that's the compassion for the benefit of all beings is actually defined by the practices in the 6 paramitas. So it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of overlap here. So maybe I'll just take a moment and stop and make sure that I'm making sense so far, more or less, hopefully. We're going to get to practice. I'm not going to talk all evening. So again, essentially, Lojong is reframing our perspective on phenomena and events. So looking at how we see, we train to view from a fresh perspective. Looking deeply at how we see, reforming our deep heart, and reforming how we see. Let me just think of an example. I mean, this happens to me a lot, you know. You might, I don't know, this is maybe just kind of a trivial example, but I think it happens to us a lot. You'll see somebody, maybe you'll meet somebody, maybe somebody at work. In our human mind, we size people up, right? I mean, we just do. And I think that's a habit that we've probably needed to develop, in times past. And so we make assumptions about somebody, just based on how they look and what kind of clothing they have on and so on, and how they talk and so on. And then you find out, after getting to know them a little bit, that you were completely wrong. That you were like completely and totally so wrong that you just kind of have to chuckle to yourself. So this is one of the things that we can learn, is that we can teach ourselves to not to make those assumptions necessarily, or to make them less often, or to really question, what is it we're thinking? How are we seeing? How am I looking at this situation? Okay. So to give you kind of a capsule history, a very brief history of Lojong. So there are many, many teachings of Lojong in the Tibetan tradition, many of them. And the one that is in this handout and that is online as a PDF, maybe not right this minute, but it will be. It's the most famous and the most well-known in the West, the 7-point mind training. And it's believed that the teachings were brought to Tibet by an Indian yogi and scholar named Atisha Dipankara. And he traveled to Tibet in 1042 at the invitation of the Tibetan rulers of the time. And I guess he wrote a poem that describes an arduous sea journey that he made to Sumatra and Java to study with Sirlingpa, who was also known as Dharmakirti. So these teachings come from roughly that time period. I always try to imagine what that arduous sea journey would have been like, in some, wooden boat. I think maybe didn't have silk. The Vikings used to make their sails out of wool. So I imagine a boat with wool sails. Anyway, then the teachings of Atisha were written down in the 12th century by Chikawa as a series of aphorisms known as slogans. So they're called slogans today. I think that the term slogan apparently was chosen by Chogyam Trungpa, a famous Tibetan teacher. Apparently he liked the word slogan, even though for a lot of Americans especially it brings up like advertising and jingles. But if you think about it, slogan might actually be the best word, because think how often those advertising jingles get stuck in your head. And so these slogans actually function in the same way, and we'll look into that more in a couple of weeks. But that's what they're designed to do. They're short, they're pithy statements, and once you work with them, they're designed, when you face a situation, they arise in your mind. So it is kind of like a jingle or an advertising slogan, even though I have a little bit of a to the word, but there it is. So again, these slogans, they are simple. They're a very direct kind of training, and they're meant to awaken the heart, again, to allow us to check our attitude. Again, lo means mind, lo means mind or attitude, and jong means training. And so it offers a means for transforming the ingrained habits of me first, or as some teachers put it, self-cherishing mind. These teachings are designed to be an antidote to that. So, using this document here, and you don't have to have it with you. This is my master copy, and this is the one that's 2 pages. The 7-point mind training is divided into, seven categories. So the first one, and we're going to practice with the first 2 this evening. So the first category is presentation of the preliminaries. So we establish a basis for practicing with these slogans. And they don't list them here, but it just says first train in the preliminaries. And I'll say more about those in a couple of minutes. And then the second phase, or the second chunk, is training in the awakening mind, which is said to be the main practice. And there's 2 sections to training in the awakening mind. The first one is training in ultimate awakening mind, or developing absolute bodhicitta, which is, it can be a little heady. I mean, because Norman Fisher, this Buddhist teacher here, is also Jewish. He talks a lot about it's a lot like thinking about God, which maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's in that same kind of realm, where you're thinking of the ultimate nature of something. So that's the ultimate awakening mind, or absolute bodhicitta, is kind of it basically gives us a basis from which we start to embrace the world and from which to see the world. And we'll practice with those tonight. And then the conventional awakening mind, which is the practical. So you could say that the ultimate awakening mind is sort of maybe thinking about it as the ideal, and then the conventional awakening mind is the practical. These are the practical steps you can take, the things you do on an everyday basis, getting down to the hard work. And then the third category, and we'll say more about these as this class goes on, is taking adverse conditions onto the path of enlightenment. So how do we work with the things that we don't like in our life? How do we work with those and turn those into the path of enlightenment? The fifth one is making this practice. This says here, presentation of a lifetime's practice in summary, but it's basically making practice your whole life. That's essentially what this is how do we make practice our whole life? And then how do we know we have trained? Or as they put it here, presentation of the measure of having trained the mind. How do we constantly check ourselves? And I'm not going to go into, there's 59 slogans here. I'm not going to be able to go into all of them, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of how this thing is set up. And then the sixth one is, these are almost like the precepts. So it's sort of like a set of rules that you commit to, the commitments of mind training. These are the things that you always carry with you and remember. I like this. Transform your attitudes, but remain as you are. So it's kind of an interesting teaching. And then the final one is presentation of the precepts of mind training. So we're going to focus on the first 2 tonight. And if most of that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, don't worry, because we'll continue to go over it. So presentation of the preliminaries, the basis. What we're going to do is we're going to sit in meditation for about, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Maybe I'll just do this and you can do a bell to finish. Would that work? Just so people, would that be okay?
You make a signal?
I'll make a signal of some kind. Maybe just do this. So we'll start with, we'll just sit in meditation. And I'm just going to read the preliminaries. There are 4 statements to reflect on. And so I'm just going to read them slowly as we sit for a few minutes. And I just want you to think about them, and be open, be curious. There's no right way to interpret any of this. And then we'll discuss it a little bit afterward. Sound like a plan? Okay, so ring a bell. Just once is good, yeah. So the first contemplation is to reflect on the rarity and preciousness of a human life. The rarity and preciousness of a human life. Again, contemplate the rarity and preciousness of a human life. The second reflection is to reflect on the absolute inevitability of death. We do not know the time of our death or when it will happen, but the absolute inevitability is clear. The absolute inevitability of death. Reflect on the awesome and indelible power of our actions. The awesome and indelible power of our actions. The inescapability of suffering. The inescapability of suffering. curious people's sort of, how did this land in your body? I always feel a kind of visceral feeling to these. I'd be curious what others feel.
Kind of a little bit of nausea.
Yeah. And this heavy stuff. You didn't come here to hear about that. You didn't come here to be reminded that you're going to die. I was like, I don't want to know that. Yeah. I know that's good. Yeah, I mean that's I felt a little bit of that too. Anyone else?
Still, it's like a tinge of like regret, or like questioning what I'm doing with my life.
Yeah.
I think it really helps sharpen something about like how we spend our time.
Sure. I mean, Fisher makes a comment that that from a Tibetan, from a teaching perspective, from a Buddhist perspective, once you contemplate on those, you realize that the only adequate response is some form of spiritual practice. The only adequate, so. And maybe there's other adequate responses, but or maybe inadequate responses. Plenty of inadequate responses. I think that we see that all over the world all the time. Anyone else? It's heavy stuff. It's not meant to be a downer, but it does give you pause. It occurred to me that I didn't write these up, but I can, and I can have them posted on the website so that you all can download them and look at them if you want to. Unless you just want to forget all about them, So, yeah. I notice for me that, when I read rarity and preciousness of a human life, I kind of feel like, oh, that's putting me at the center, like as a human, a little bit, but then I think, compared to other creatures on this planet, even though there's like 7 billion of us, there's way more of a lot of other creatures, like way more ants, way more, bacteria, viruses, all that kind of stuff. So it is kind of rare, I guess, in that sense. And then I think, as a human, we have the opportunity to do this. I don't know what other creatures do. I think about my cat, who's pretty much, her whole life revolves around me feeding her as often as possible. That is her life, And it's kind of sad, I love her. She's my cat, but you know what I mean, So. She could do with a little restraint, but she doesn't know how to do that.
When you read these statements, I feel kind of like, when you ask it physically, like the kind of exhaustion you might get after losing an argument.
Oh, interesting.
They are kind of like statements that are the end of all arguments. Like, you can create all of these justifications or ideas or reasons for your actions.
Sure.
Death is inevitable.
Yeah.
So how about that?
What do you think of that? Gotcha.
And so there's a kind of like, it's both like exhaustion, but also kind of a relief, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, right. After everything I can say and do, there is the rarity and preciousness of a human life.
Right.
I can't really argue that point, and they each sort of have that quality.
That's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up. They each kind of have that quality. They're not like cheerful particularly, but there is that. How was the word you said?
Which word?
Well, it doesn't matter. Whatever. But there is that kind of, not a finality to it, but more of the quality that you kind of go, oh, this is what life is about. Maybe that's kind of what you were getting at. Like, this is what my life is. It's not going to be perfect. We're still going to fritter away time now and then and all that sort of thing. But, I think that, especially when in our interactions with others, and how easy it is to, again, I have, we all have difficult people in our life, and how easy it is to just kind of go, but how can we change our attitude towards those difficult people, or even the abstract ones like politicians and so on that we don't like, So we'll get more into that, but that's kind of that's part of where it lands for me, is just kind of thinking about, how we just sort of dismiss a lot of what, goes on around our lives because we're very concerned about us, which is, that's how we are, but we don't have to stay that way. So, any other questions or anything, any response is valid. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I think it's very automatic to hear them and reflect on them on my personal own self, but also holding it as a truth for others. I think it was, especially for the one with the inevitability of death, I felt like a sense of camaraderie, recognizing that at some point there will come a time where all of us in this room will be no longer. And there's kind of like a sense of preciousness of the group of people knowing that, and also suffering, knowing the suffering of others, and knowing the preciousness of another's life.
Yeah. Very, very true. I think that we have whatever we may have nothing else in common, but we do have that. Yeah, so interesting. Okay. Well, we'll have time for more questions later, so that's no big deal. So this might feel like a lot for the first night, but I'm trying to pick out what's what we can do in basically 3 to 3.5 classes, which is not very much for this complex topic. But I'm just going to go ahead and dive in to some practices around absolute bodhicitta, and if all they do is give you a flavor of it, that's good enough for tonight, for sure. So I do like how Fisher talks about absolute bodhicitta in a certain way as like absolute love. Like not the, I didn't bring it with me, but the Greeks had like 6 words for love. Not just the romantic, intimate love, but like this open-heartedness. Maybe that camaraderie, goodwill toward everyone. It's kind of that kind of love. And that absolute bodhicitta can open us to that, to every single being. And it's a feeling or a practice where we learn that, let me back up a little bit. It's based on a recognition that fundamentally, we appear to be separate in this room. We have our own lives. I don't know you, or I know a few of you in here, but not some of you I've never seen before. Our lives are interesting how they're crossing at this moment. And so we have this time to where, even though I've never met you before or you before, here we are together, and so we're not separate in that way. And another aspect of absolute bodhicitta is the only way that we can love ourselves is by loving others, and the only way we can truly love others is to love ourselves. So the self-compassion practices and so on that I'll go later on, we'll talk more about that. But love is really, it's big. It's a big topic. And again, it doesn't mean that you like people, or that you want to be with them. That's the hard part about love, is that we think we have to like them and hang out with them. We don't. But we can try to love them because they're human. Because, like Joichi said, we're all in the same boat on a number of aspects of our lives. So we'll think about absolute bodhicitta again as an aspiration. We're developing an aspiration. We're going to look at the nature of how things are. It's kind of pointing in the direction of absolute love. And then when we do the relative bodhicitta starting next week, that's the application of this. So this stuff might feel like kind of heady, and hopefully it won't make too many people feel too uncomfortable. But I know, I'm like, why did I come here? But this is really interesting. This is super interesting. So again, I think we'll probably, we have time for maybe 10 or 15 minutes of meditation again. And then I'll read them, and they are different, so we'll go. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sort of slogans within the practice of absolute bodhicitta. So go ahead and ring the bell when you're ready. So the first slogan under absolute bodhicitta: see everything as a dream. And as you sit, can you grab a thought at the very beginning? Can you find a place before a thought arises? We see everything as a dream. Time passing moment to moment to moment. Examine the nature of awareness. Can you find a concrete, identifiable self, a solid me within your awareness? Don't get stuck on peace. It might feel good to see everything as a dream, or to rest in some kind of peaceful awareness, but there's no place to land. Don't get stuck there. Rest in the openness of mind. Breathe in, breathe out. Feel the breath, feel the body. In post-meditation, be a child of illusion. Remember awe and wonder, awe and wonder. So, what think? Or what feel? Could maybe talk about them a little bit from my understanding. I think it's important to see everything as a dream, that not that it is a dream, but it's like one, kind of. So, I mean, probably all of us remember what happened earlier today. I was at work, you were here, you were there. But, it's done, it's gone. That's kind of weird, don't you think? I mean, you remember it, but it's gone, and you have evidence that you've done something. Like, I'm thinking about your loom out there. You have evidence that you've done some work because this weaving thing is here. But it's just interesting to. I think it's just an interesting reflection to think that our life is just passing moment to moment to moment. And it can be. I mean, I think about this. I'm 64, so I think about this of kind of like, boy, when I was a kid, the summer lasted forever, and now it's like, the last 15 years have gone by in a blink, so that's just kind of a strange thing that happens. And so it is kind of like a dream that way, so and life is impermanent. It's changing moment to moment to moment, but there's a very little, or actually nothing, we can truly grasp onto. And while this may sound, again, kind of depressing, I find it actually, to me, it points back to how precious things are. Because things are impermanent, we need to have compassion and kindness and love for them. I mean, looking at the plants out there, how they've changed, growing, and then we're going to cut the grass, and then the flowers are blooming, and then the apples we'll have apples and the little plums back there on the trees, and then those will fall at some point, and they'll be gone, and then the tree will die back. I mean, this is the cycle of life. So I don't know if that helps. Just kind of reflect on that a little bit. If anybody has any comments, you don't have to have any, but.
I was remembering like my dreams from last night,
Mm-hmm.
and like I had one of those, some kind of anxiety in a dream,
Mm-hmm.
and then like would wake up and remember, oh, it's just a dream, and so like this sort of like the awakened me would say, hey, calm down, like just like release, allow yourself to sleep. Like those, you don't need to worry about those things. and then falling back to sleep and having, not completely calm sleep, but some kind of amount of relaxation. So I think oftentimes hearing, look at things as a dream, it's kind of like, oh, it's not real, that's what it's pointing to, but also like, where's sort of like a more awakened place in me that says, like, those anxieties, you can let go of those and kind of rest.
Yeah, no, and that's beautiful, Joichi, because I think that's a really good point about, when we see everything as a dream, the tendency is to say it's not real. It is real, moment to moment to moment. It's just that it's not permanent. Absolutely, it's real. And I think we have to, even our emotions, they're real in the moment. When we feel intense emotion, it's real in that moment, but it doesn't last. From a scientific neuroscience perspective, what I understand, emotions are designed to be temporary. We can't, but, different ones can, we have different effects on us, but that is the point, is that it's temporary. So you can kind of go, oh, like, I had an anxiety dream the other night too, it was about this class, and, and I'm waking up going, did that happen? Did that really happen? Or no, did I really do that? But then I had to just kind of go, no, it's okay. It's okay. And so I think, we can work with that in our actual awakened life. When we, at least for me, I question myself, what did I just think there? Was that accurate? Was that skillful? Was that helpful? Maybe I can just let go of that, feeling of taking it personally, as an example. When someone says something and you take it personally, and then you're grouchy the rest of the day, those kinds of things. And then, nature of awareness, that's always a fun one, trying to find a solid me. You find your body, but that's your body. We think, most of us feel like that we exist somewhere up in here. But I think even neuroscience is starting to prove that there's no place in the brain that's the center of me. It's a combination of things working together. It's always what Buddhism calls the aggregates. We have all of these things that are working together, but there's no one single thing that's me. Awareness is really, I don't even think, I keep reading a lot about neuroscience, I think, because of my work, but they still don't quite, they being the neuroscientists and so on, don't understand what it is. Consciousness, awareness, I don't think that they truly understand what it is. So, but what is it for us? So that's just kind of, it's interesting. And I think the whole thing about not getting stuck on peace is that we can kind of get into this la-la land of everything as a dream and examining awareness and who am I really, and then you're sort of, then you can become untethered and just kind of float off like a helium balloon. So you don't want to get stuck there. There's one thing about these slogans that's kind of interesting. It leads you down a certain path that says, oh, nope, come over here now. Nope, come over here now. So to just kind of keep us in a place where we're not landing anywhere and saying this is it, and keeps you in a place of exploration. I think rest and openness of mind seems pretty straightforward. Staying in the body, staying in the breath, allowing mind to settle. It's never going to be quiet, and mine hasn't been anyway. But it'll be settled. And again, your example of the dream is good. It's like, okay,
It's just a life.
it's just a life. What is it? The gift and the problem. Or the gift and the challenge. And I think my favorite one actually is in post-meditation, be a child of illusion. And I kind of interpreted that as awe and wonder, really, look outside and look at those clouds, or, look at this grape arbor over here, or the fig is going to have a lot of fruit, it's just this life is so much all around us all the time. But part of what this slogan was getting at was, it's really easy for people who don't follow a spiritual path to kind of diss people wwho do. Oh, you're naive if you think that everybody can be kind and that we can all be compassionate towards people we hate, and you're just you're an idealist. And so I think what that that slogan is encouraging us that no, it's not that. Maintain that kind of childlike innocence. It can actually help you. You don't need to be naive and let people run all over you, but there is a way that we fall into the kind of whatever the I don't know, what's the word I want, dominant paradigm or something like that. Just the sort of the dominant way of looking at the world. I don't know. We have all kinds of assumptions about people, that are not true, and so we can be compassionate toward them. We can see that they're suffering. I think maybe that's a good way of looking at it. We're all in that same boat. I look at a couple of people in my life that have been particularly difficult, and I'm thinking, wow, what would it be? What must it be like to be him? What must it be like to be like so angry like all the time? As an example. So having just kind of flipping it a little bit and not just holding that person at arm's length. But I say, child of illusion, look around at this world. Look around at everything around us. Get up a little bit early and watch the sunrise. So.
A lot earlier.
A lot of, yes, you get up before the sun rises, yes. I don't know when the sun rises right now. It's probably a little bit later than it's been, but or a little bit earlier than it's been. Yeah. And if I don't think it'll be dark yet by the time we're finished here. When is sunset now? I haven't been paying any attention. It's like 8:45 or something, but. So we have about 10 minutes or so. That was all I was intending to cover, and it might have felt like a lot, but that's okay. It's okay if you don't get it all. I can put some of this material online, and you can look at it during the weekend. I actually really encourage you to practice with some of this as much as you can. When you just, you don't have to do it for very long. Just kind of, when something strikes you as, maybe you're, I don't know, being self-critical of yourself for some reason, or thinking that you don't measure up, you can go, well, what were the chances of me being born in the time and the place and living this life that I'm living now? Thinking about the rarity and preciousness of a human life, thinking about the rarity and preciousness of your own life. So those are you can practice with them kind of in the moment rather than sitting down and doing them formally. Or when you're about to, when you feel like you're gonna maybe, I don't know. These are just things that are coming to my mind. Being unkind to somebody for some reason, and you think, oh, the awesome and indelible power of my actions. What do I really want to do that? Am I going to let that little bit of unkind? Oh, it doesn't matter. Well, maybe it does. If it's going to ripple out into the world, just things like that. Just it can be simple. So I just encourage you to, work with those. Does anybody have any other questions? Anything? Yeah?
Can you clarify those first 4 reflections?
Say them again, you mean?
What were those were the...
Those are the preliminaries. Those are the preliminaries. Yeah, sorry. That's like setting the stage.
Yeah.
It's like building the foundation for your spiritual life. Fisher mentions that, that if you come here long enough, you end up getting at those in Zazen. They may not arise formally as reflections, but they do eventually rise. So yeah, they're the practice and the preliminaries. Again, this is a very structured practice, and it comes out of the sort of the list. Tibetan and Indian Buddhism are very much organized in sort of structure and lists and those kinds of things. So
I ask because I'm going to make kind of a strange connection.
Okay. No, I don't mind. That sounds like fun.
Because this feeling of nausea that
Yes.
you brought up, and just
Yes.
sort of this question of like, whoa, those are big statements.
Yeah.
What do I do with that?
Yeah.
I was remembering, I'm kind of a national parks nerd.
Oh, I didn't know that
But,
actually.
Well, like the Grand Canyon,
Yeah.
when it was becoming a national monument, there was a lot of sort of argument around it about whether we should give up the land to be, treasured in this way.
Sure.
And there was this fellow who from Europe who was like, "This is an amazing, unbelievable reality that you have in North America, the Grand Canyon. It's unbelievable that it exists. And you should always, as Americans, ask yourself, is this law that I'm making, or this statement, or this artwork that I'm making, or this choice, is it worthy of being in the same nation as the Grand Canyon? Right? So I like that. And in a
I
way,
like that too.
when those words, that feeling of like, wow, I can't comprehend, it's so much bigger than me, right? Those statements, those 4 preliminaries feel like that to me. It's sort of like, I get so annoyed at this grocer for some reason.
Sure,
It becomes so petty, right? In relation, and how does that stand in front of
The Grand Canyon.
Yeah, but how do my actions and thoughts stand near or before these the inevitability of death? And so I'm making this connection because I have similar feelings about them, sort of like, oh wow, how petty I can be, and how much bigger we actually are than
That's a really good point.
I don't know, these are just some.
No, I think that's really beautiful, and I just was thinking about how I get mad at my phone. It's like, how dumb is that? To get mad at an inanimate object like a phone. It doesn't make any sense, it's just a stupid phone, you get mad at it like it's going to be able to do something about it. And so like, what is that, where does that, those minor irritations, they have an effect. But I really like that, is this thing worthy enough to be in a country that has the Grand Canyon? I love that. I mean, that's awe and wonder right there. I mean, I think this is probably an immaterial point, but I think I read somewhere that when the first Europeans, whoever they were, when they came to that part of this country now, and they saw the Grand Canyon for the first time, they were like, oh, it's probably 100 feet down there, because they'd never seen anything like that. And they had their mind had no way of comprehending how big this thing is. So that's really beautiful. Yeah. So is this comment worthy of my energy and attention? In my precious human life. Is this action? And we'll do it. We'll do it. But if you reflect on it afterward, you might do it less the next time, right? So that's the other side of it. You're not going to one thing I really want to caution you about, probably because I do this, is that if you practice these things and then you mess up, don't beat yourself up about it. It's not worth it. We all mess up, daily, hourly sometimes. So, it's not about that. It's not about holding yourself to some standard. It's about working with yourself as this raw material of a life, and to refine, like the mind refinement. Anything else? Is anybody coming back next week? No, just kidding. Well, we can finish a little early if you like, if there's nothing else. And if you think of something, you can email me or email the Buddha Eye office, and they can forward it to me. So I forget whether my email is on. I'm going to be having the other part of the email I sent today, if it was opened yet, was that I would be available for practice discussions, and people can just email me for times. So we can discuss that way if you feel more comfortable one-on-one. So, okay. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you. Buddha